Welcome to Beyond the Tech. My name is Vic Miles, your host, and I want to welcome you to another podcast where we delve into the future of retail with an innovator who's driving that future. All right, my guest today is Nolan Wheeler. Nolan is a founder of a company called SYNQ, SYNQ, SYNQ Technology in 2015. After a multi-decade career in retail, building expertise in asset protection, operations, and store transformation. As a recognized thought leader in the market, he serves as a brain trust panelist for Retail Wire and co-hosts the Modern Work Mondays podcast. If you've seen that, you know Nolan. Nolan's based in Victoria, British Columbia, and enjoys spending his free time on the water with his young family. Nolan and I met some time ago when we were pursuing business with one of Canada's largest retail brands. His energy was just infectious, and I hope that you, our viewers, will find some of that in our conversation today. So, welcome, Nolan.
Thank you for having me, Vic. I appreciate it, man.
Yes. So before we jump in, to the discussion, I'd like the audience to get to know you. We call this show Beyond the Tech, right? So we could jump into the technology, but I think it's more interesting to get to know the folks who are driving that technology. And so I read your bio, and it doesn't begin to express the depth of what I know about Nolan. And so maybe you can start about, talking to us about where else your passion leads you. And I mean to say, what does Nolan like to do when he's not running the business?
Yeah, you bet. I grew up in retail, right? I started pushing carts and spinning tuna cans on the shelf, right? So loving that kind of lifestyle of, back to school, getting ready for Christmas and through, recovery into innovation and spending some time in the summer. So living in the Pacific Northwest, my limited little boating season, I try to do my best to do my fishing and my cruising and spending time on the water with the family. So yeah, it's that's my world, Vic, is head down a lot and then trying to get a little bit of reprieve in those summer months here in the Pacific Northwest.
Right. Well, thank you for that. I think we have an open invitation for me to join you on the boat someday.
You absolutely do have an open invite. I can't,
Yes, yes.
I don't know if it has an expiry on the coupon. No
Well,
expiry.
I mean, your window is short. Your window is short. So,
Anytime
uh,
you want.
thank you. I've been intrigued by the space that you operate in, and I don't know that it's really well defined, right? So I wanted to introduce it to the Beyond the Tech audience. I consider myself a store operations expert, and I wanted to have a conversation with you, especially as I realized that some things have changed, right, in retail, and interestingly, some things have not. And so what are you seeing as the hottest aspect of store operations and customer service?
Yeah, I look at this entire space that we're in, Vic, which is we have this optionality. We can shop online or we can shop brick and mortar. And I look at it just down to like how much time does it take to do that in store versus the time to buy it online. And then we focus on the nasties. We focus on those high friction spots in the store. We're not, I always tell people, we're not here to change the way we sell craft dinner. But when we see all these locking cases with infant formula and with, healthcare, now we see fabric care locked up a lot in retail grocery and those things. How do we try to change that in-store experience to alleviate that friction? Because I think that, and if we see even what, Amazon saying with Jassy on his last earnings call, a lot of people are going to, the online world to get away from that high friction stuff. So we focus corely on the friction items, the big stuff, the high risk, the high shrink, and the stuff that's got a really high propensity of out of stock. You go to the store and you go, out of stock again. I knew better. I should have just bought it online.
Yeah. And that customer service in a timely manner is really what it's all about. You talked about optionality. I've never heard it called that, but optionality, you really want to grab the customer and serve them quickly. Right. I mean, I can recall the days in terms of what it took to get service. You'd hear chatter overhead, customer needs assistance in hardware or housewares or whatever. And after a while, it made me feel like I was on staff. Right? Like, hold on, maybe I should go find the help for this customer. And so, many retailers have turned to using walkie-talkie radios, right? In keeping that chatter at least confined to the aisle that you're standing in, and that space around you. And I know you have a perspective on bringing that to the digital age. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, think about that evolution, right? Like at first, everything in the store was self-service, right? We think about Piggly Wiggly inventing the shelf in whatever it was, 1914. Everything we can grab, we can take it up to the front, and we can pay for it. That was that transformation from general store where everything was behind the counter. And then since then, with socioeconomics and with labor and with I mean, I'm sure when Home Depot opened its doors, I don't think they ever thought they'd sell a $2,500 Hilti gun. So as things have changed, we reacted and responded and we said, okay, we got to start using overhead paging to dispatch and quarterback our resources. We max out paging. To your point, it's like becomes chaotic and hectic listening to all these pages over the intercom. So then there's a transition to we'll probably still talk as much, if not more, but we'll create it as an experience only for the associate, not for the consumer. And then we've had that change that goes over to like the handheld devices and trying to move some of that traffic over. But that's probably one of the most interesting things I seem to be talking about on a day-to-day basis with different retailers is it disrespectful to take my device out of my pocket to do something in front of the customer? I like the radio. They don't have a kind of a sign-in credentialing thing. So there's like a turnover, part-time thing. So yeah, I mean, voice and radio and that whole piece, I mean, that's probably the evolution. And now it's a matter of how do we manage it moving forward? And to your point, with AI, now all of a sudden we can start to reimagine what radios look like because it's no longer just, traffic that's just sitting there. And then if you hear it, you hear it. If you don't, you don't. Now AI kind of really transforms the way that natural language can help within frontline work, but of course, retail frontline work.
Wow. And, using AI to bring analog voice to the digital interface, and using AI to do that is genius. Right. And I remember when you first told me about it, I thought, wait, what did you say? And we should dig into that a bit. But the adoption is one of the things that I would ask you to do. It's one of the biggest challenges that I have in my business with Microsoft is, there's a lot of good ideas. Executives are excited. You can get a few stores excited, especially with the pilot push and the hubbub. But, how do you get adoption, right? And realistically, the reason that analog radio still exists is because it's a bit of a safety blanket, right? I can go there, it's comfortable, it always works. It's a dial tone type experience. And so how can one effectively manage the change management related to implementing this kind of technology? Because you're putting wheels on a horse or something. It just seems odd.
Yeah, it's a good point, right? I mean, if you think about, whenever you're innovating in different technologies and something that's transformational, you try to find a partner or a customer client that is seeing that same level of transformation. They're way out
Yeah.
there, they've got a great vision. So for those folks, giving everyone a piece of mobile compute is table stakes and saying, we need a work comm strategy, and we're gonna, what do we want? Sync Nolan. And we say, well, why don't we consider Microsoft Teams, and we'll bring that into Teams and then you'll take that and you have that success and you'll say, let's scale that to more and more retailers. And then unfortunately, more and more retailers say, we don't have a device strategy, we don't have enough devices, or we have enough devices, but we're challenged with shared devices and we're challenged with logins and credentials and a comm strategy. So for years it was let's defeat the radio, let's replace the radio. But then as you really get into all these different deployments, you realize the radios may not go away at all. In fact, there's retailers out there that have a one-to-one device strategy for all associates,
Mm.
but they still wear that RF radio because there are inherent benefits of voice and the lack of credentialing and sign-in and, RF being really reliable on voice and Wi-Fi, especially in retail, can be troubling with gaps and zones and interference and so forth. So, really it was like this aha moment like a year and a half ago, which was let's stop trying to defeat the radios. It's really more of a what is the in-store comm strategy in totality, and it's okay. It can be a device, mobile compute, but it can also be a radio. And with AI, you can do probably 90 to 95% of what you can do in a mobile smart device now on a radio with AI. And then there's things that on a radio you can't do on a piece of mobile compute. So radios become very compelling for a lot of retailers to bring that into their frontline work to support that customer that's trying to get that really expensive item out of that lock case.
So where is the AI in all of this? I know when you first described that to me, again, it's hard to sort of comprehend where do you use AI. Is it translating voice into text? Are you doing data capture? Where's the AI?
Yeah, I mean, probably the best way to answer that, Vic, is to tell the story. And the story was I
Okay.
came from a show. I think you and I were at that same show, and I had a deflating flight home and talking to a number of retailers, and they're saying, "No, we would love to do some of that stuff, but we don't have enough devices, or we've got devices and we don't have a comm strategy like Teams or something like that. We love our radios and we're never getting up on the radios." I'm like, "Oh man, we got to get on the radio." So it started, which was, how do we send a digital notification over a radio? And we had an engineering conversation, and in a very unique fashion, we actually started here at Sync within the RF security space. So we have this really great depth of RF engineers here, and I said to the team, I said, "How do we try to take those digital signals, translate them in some type of a way? Maybe it's in the cloud or on edge, and how do we push that out to a radio device?" And it took a while, but it was sped up with AI. And I can remember being in the same room I'm in here now, speaking with you, and I got the demo, and they said, "Here's the demo," and I hit a call button, and it goes to the radio, and I go like, "That's kind of cool." And they said, "Well, now claim it," and I say, "No way." So I claim it and say, "Yeah, I'm on the way," and suddenly all of the pieces are all updating each other. And I said to my team, I said, "That's amazing." And that's exactly what we wanted to do. But I said, "Can we now listen to this radio traffic all the time?" And my engineers made fun of me and they said, "Oh no, and you're such a retail nerd. Why on earth would we want to listen to that traffic?" I said, trust me, I think it's really valuable if we can listen to that traffic. Maybe now we can see, what's going on all day? What are the repetitive challenges and strains? What do we have that we're missing in our scheduling? So to answer that question on AI, now it was a matter of, like, you and I do a lot of Teams calls together, and almost every single call I'm on, people say, "Do you mind if we record and transcribe?" And everybody says, "Yes, let's do that." Right? There's such great value. Now it's a retail store that says, "Can we record and transcribe what's going on in the stores?" And we say, "Yeah, you can record, you can transcribe, you can run some analysis." And now you've got like a co-pilot in the store that says, "Here's what you did in this store, in this region, in this district, so on and so forth. And here are the same things that are coming up every single day. Customers can't find this. There's complaints with Y. Shoplifting occurrences really get exacerbated within this window." And now suddenly we have this phenomenal data, this like Google review trust score that says, here's what really is happening in the business. And now we can take that and we can say, okay, we misevaluated. We didn't make that investment in an inventory integrity system, but it sure sounds like we got a challenge because, I'm making things up. 37% of the traffic has to do something with not being able to find stock. So it's really like that was like the first piece for us in terms of this radio strategy to leverage AI and natural language to give the insights to the business that within that closed loop of radios we were totally blind to.
Wow, and our audience includes a lot of consumer goods nerds, and all the retail nerds in the audience their wheels are spinning and saying, "I know what I could do with that." But from a consumer goods brand standpoint, I think what I hear you saying is, if there is a call button next to the high value hand drill in a DIY store, and you press the button, that you get, that's a signal that you have demand. It's a demand signal for your item from a customer. Now match that with the sales to say how often, right? You mentioned you were making up to 37%, but we could start to quantify that, right? And have brands, just change the experience, right? So if I again am selling a high value drill, I want that experience to be different than scan, press the button, wait, wait, press the button again, right? And then how long till it's claimed? You mentioned this claim concept, whereas today, to claim it, and we've both been in these stores, right? To claim a customer request, an event, you go to the customer, turn off the call button, right? It's kind of like a cashier coming over to do an override. You turn the key and do your password, and then, okay, I know who claimed it.
Yeah.
But being able to sort of get all of that data, I think that's what you're talking about. That's pretty powerful. That could change the industry. And this is why I wanted to talk to you. I thought, wow. Now tell me this: you're a startup business, effectively, growing fast. Any concern with what I think is your first mover advantage? Are you okay on the podcast? Not that I have a million viewers or anything, but do you have a secret sauce there that you say, this is the, we're ready to go to market? Clearly you have. So,
Yeah, I mean, we've been a fast mover in a lot of different little spaces, and frankly, that movement early taught us to get to radios. If you would have said to me 4 years ago, "Hey, Nolan,
Right.
it's going to be at NRF 2025. You guys are going to be talking about the whole big conversation." I remember doing a video with Shish. We're going to do this big conversation about analog radios. I'm like, "You guys are out of your mind. Radios are going to end up in the dumpster bin. What are you talking about radios?" So it's actually been that first mover that got us to the place that says, to scale, it's not a mobile compute device requirement. It's to go those other places. And the other part about being in the business that we're in is that, as we've launched this in a very large North American retailer, a number of large North American retailers, but one that in particular, it's public domain. That someone's going to go into that
Got
store,
it.
they're going to take a look at it and see it. So yeah, I mean, we're open about the technologies because inherent in the space that we work in, we've got public stores using this stuff. We heavily depend on trying to patent our stuff, and we've had some good success with certain patents in the space. So yeah, we talk about it openly, with the knowledge that we've got some of those patents behind us. But it's just a matter of how do we transform this space and give people more of like an Uber-like experience. You said yourself just now, the data that comes in from claiming something from the associate side, and then kind of when did they show up, and then we go as deep as to what did they buy. You know, the consumer doesn't see that. And I think that's probably like one of the greatest things that we've learned socially with Uber and Uber Eats and rapid delivery is, if you and I were calling a cab after NRF, and we phoned the cab company, they said, yeah, it's going to be 10 minutes. 7 minutes feels like half an hour. And at
Yeah.
some point, you and I say, well, let's walk down the street because there's a coffee shop down the street we'll go to and wait at, or we'll call another company. But with Uber, we go, no, no, no. The car is right there. That's, I think, the key as well, which is whenever we build this technology, we always think about what the customer experience is because, in that little call button example, we have call buttons that sounds lame to talk about a call button in 2025, but we've got little LED lights in there. And every single time someone updates on the mobile device, on the phone or in the earpiece of the radio, as soon as they progress through that claim, we say, hey, received, and someone's on the way. It's claimed, your item is ready at receiving because you purchased your TV at XYZ retailer. So for us, as important it is to have that data that drives decision making on the operational component, we got to give customers that Uber like experience to say,
Mm.
don't leave, wait, we are on the way. We're doing it. I mean, everybody on this call and probably everybody, whoever's dropping a store, has all been abandoned by someone who said, I'll be back in 5 minutes to help you. And we've never seen them again. Are they helping us and they're getting the thing down from high bay, or are they having a cigarette on the loading bay dock?
Right. Yeah. One of the stats you shared with me is 40%, 44% of customers have abandoned a purchase in a store and gone online. They've injected, their optionality when faced with a long wait time. That you're right. 7 minutes on a curb when they told you 10 is long. 7 minutes waiting in an aisle is, yeah, it's a bridge too far. I'm just not gonna. I'm walking to, I got 8 items to get.
Wiliot's visibility platform connects the digital and physical worlds using IoT pixels, battery-free smart tags that push data to the cloud in real time without human intervention. Their mission is to make every single thing an agent of change, enabling ambient IoT by adding intelligence and automation to food, apparel, packaging, pharmaceuticals, and other products. Learn more at wiliot.com.
Let's switch gears a bit. I still think it's fascinating, sort of the way that you've attacked this legacy experience. I'm interested in what we talked about when we first met. There was a time when retailers were sort of making the case that organized retail crime was a big issue for shrink, right? And we now know that those assertions have kind of been softened, right? They're a driver, but not the predominant driver of inventory shrink across a business. And so, do you think there's still a need in market for high value items to be what I'll call properly experienced or accessed with little friction?
So yeah, I mean, there are two very compelling schools of thought on where ORC is, and I don't necessarily want to dive into that. What I want to dive into is that if we think about the math, and we have this little Moneyball mantra that we follow. If we look at the math and we look at all of those high value items that we lock up, we mentioned a couple of them at the beginning, oral care, fabric care, so on and so forth, all those drills that you want to go buy. Um, they're all sold at a very low velocity. And again, like we're not trying to sell the way we sell craft dinner. And one of my favorite things to talk about, and where I think retailers really need to challenge themselves in this ORC capacity, is regardless of how we solve the lockup or the protection side of the business, that expels a tremendous amount of labor for an item that doesn't sell with a very high level of velocity. So like where we go on this entire thing is to say, irregardless of what the shrink looks like, we really need to start looking more practically at how much labor goes into this. Like, how much money does it
Mm.
take to spider wrap on something and merchandise it? And now it falls over on the shelf, and now the shelf holds two less because the spider wrap doesn't allow us to have the proper amount of floor fill absorption on that product. And all those other pieces. Putting stuff in a locking showcase is more costly than opening it and taking it to the front. It's very, very labor intensive to do that. So we look at more of the fact of, you can be in whatever camp you want to be on ORC. We really need to look at the mathematics of the labor expenditure of just how much labor we're putting into those products to reimagine what does merchandising look like and what does fulfillment look like for those products, more on the velocity and less on the is it ORC or not.
Interesting. And then, for the brands, what should they think about uniquely? I hypothesize that, they might like to up level the experience based on the data that comes back. But is there a place for brands to innovate and evolve with this new approach? And maybe it's not, and I'll give you sort of my thinking. Maybe it's not to piggyback off the retailer value prop. I don't know if you've given thought to what is the brand value prop that gets your technology paid for, right? Largely, retailers are going to look to the brands to say, "Hey, it's if I implement a half a point impact on my cost of goods sold, I got to pass that back to the brands, or I want that savings kind of thing." So, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, everybody appreciates that it's a really frustrating experience for a consumer to shop into a store when the stuff gets locked up or whatever method the retailer's using. We know it's frustrating for the staff or the associate, and nobody ever talks about how frustrated the brands must be. That we never talk about the victim that the brand is. That those
Mm,
poor big global national consumer goods groups, right, Vic? But yeah, like they know their sales are down. We kind of talk about the products being in a prison for revenue. So yeah, there's certainly this play, and I'm surprised, frankly, that the brands haven't become more involved in reimagining the in-store experience, given that the sales are down in those stores. Maybe they just pick them up so easily through Amazon and other online communities. It's kind of a wash for them, and it's not enough of an incentive. But yeah, we see a day very soon whereby how can you turn white strips that are locked up, and that white strip being a SKU level challenge, how do you transform that into a category opportunity, thinking about it as oral care instead of just teeth whitening?
yeah, interesting. And then, one of the things that I try to sort of inject in all of my AI conversations is, human in the loop, and in this case, human to human. Do you feel like this technology and your vision of where the customer service in store goes sort of adds to the human to human interface, or does it is the human on the retailer side part of the friction? It's a question.
Yeah, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, Vic, because I think about this as, we constantly talk in the industry about in-store media. And I would argue that the media is actually the product on the shelf. And I would argue that's why we see such incredible numbers coming out of the warehouse folks. It's a pallet every 4 feet as opposed to 70 items every 4 feet. So, I think about the product as media. And if we lose the media, then we lose the in-store experience. We talked about the optionality, but that's where my head goes. I mean, I'd love to know kind of where your head goes on the whole, like, in-store humanality piece. And if suddenly CVS says we're going to get out of these 16 different categories because the draft depth is too challenging, what does that do for human interaction?
Yeah, we actually think that, and again, why I'm intrigued by the way that you're looking at the business is from an artificial intelligence standpoint. I see an opportunity for, the new hot buzzword is agentic, right? So it's AI agent, right? Taking a unit of work, right? A closed loop, which could be a unit of work, could be a large process, right? Press the button on the side counter, wait for the response. Associate comes, has some dialogue, opens the case, hands you the product. I've even been asked to, if you're not done shopping, I will take the product to the front for you,
Oh, my favorite.
right? I know, yeah, to the front for you, and then you can go ask somebody, and let's hope there's not a shift change, right, between there, right? And so,
Yeah.
um, I think, when I think about brands, I think about data, right? Retail is detail. If I had the signal of a customer in store, right, or customer interest in the item, whether it's in store, online, a and then take the signal for how did the customer enter and exit this this process, and this could be so now you're bringing together RFID signals. You're bringing together any sort of online, trails and cookies and the new incarnation therein, um, and creating a small language model, not a large language model. And we're getting into the tech here, and I don't mind it so much. Um, Such that what if the brand could say, I want to understand the customer experience around my product. Today, that takes weeks, right? I can give you your online, click experience. I can give you the in store if I can identify the customer. Do you have a loyalty program, right? How I can get frequency and that kind of thing. But what if I then add? And the reason we don't add RFID signals and NFC signals and all the things, all the ways that we track, consumers effectively, bringing that all together is where I see it coming together. And then here's the culmination back to answer the question that I originally asked you, and that is the human to human. You'll know where the human needs to be in the loop, not in the AI loop, but in the value chain loop, right? Because some customers prefer to text, in the early portions of a sales experience. When you're in discovery, does this support this kind of protocol? I'm usually looking for tech items, right? Does it do power delivery when it charges or that kind of thing? Or, will this bench hold 300 pounds? Okay, yes. And then then colors and look and feel I'm going to do on my own. Right. And I might like somebody standing next to me. And so that's kind of where I see the human to human interaction. And it really, once again, it really changes the way that we think about. We had a discussion with one of our large customers in my Microsoft capacity that talked to us about, you know, getting away from uh, legacy metrics, right? So when you look at a business, you look at a year over year metric, right? Once you bring AI into the loop, right? Is it because so year over year in terms of the click experience, bring AI into the loop, that's not granular enough, right? We can actually get much more granular and start to come up with metrics on how we should be serving customers that we haven't even thought of today. That's the really cool part, right? Is what will AI do to give signal back to business leaders that your value chain is healthy, the health of a value chain. We've got customer satisfaction, CSAT scores, that kind of thing. They're based on surveys and individual points in time. What if CSAT was the whole chain, right? Customer went through the experience with, I don't know, 3 points of friction. We're going to call that 80% satisfied. 5 points of friction is 40% satisfied or something therein. And so I do think it's up to leaders like yourself and perhaps myself and the brands, to retail and consumer goods brands, to look at the business differently and figure out where should the human stay in the loop. And it and I was sort of impressed by your lack of concern and or your confidence with, hey, we've got something that works, right? Radios have been there forever. If people were going to innovate it, you didn't say this, but it was implied in the response. If people were going to innovate it, they would have already done that, right? So you're gonna capitalize on this market. And so I think we have to do the same thing with the human to human and say, let's take a step back and say, let's look at it through a different lens.
Yeah, 100%. Again back to where we started, right? 80% of people are still going to a brick and mortar store.
Yeah.
That's the most human of these two options that we have available to us. So, yeah, I'm 100% with you, right? And again, I don't think I think the bar is really low when it comes to rapid consumable products, whether that's
Yep.
4 liter milk on the shelf for the craft dinner. It's those lower velocity items that we really need to make that investment in. And if they're locked up, a brand should be really interested. How often does nobody show up? How often does it take someone to be there within 2 minutes? What's the fall off point? How long will someone really wait? Will people wait longer for infant formula, or will they wait longer for Tide? Because I'm sure
Yeah.
there's the data on that, right? So it really comes down to, we've only had a single data point on all of those experiences in store, which is the P log. Did we sell the thing or not? We don't know all the we didn't sell stuff. So I'm 100% with you. We need to consider those data aggregation points. I don't think we need it for 4-liter milk. I think we absolutely need it for, infant formula or a DeWalt drill. So that's really where I think the fascination is focusing on that lower velocity sell through.
Yeah, that's interesting as you talk about this gap between action and result, right? So I did a lot of action, marketing, supply chain, pricing, competitive analysis, put it on the shelf, and I wait for sales, right? As is a very, sort of 50,000 foot view. In our business, I think about it as you put a product in market and then you run to the finish line and wait to see what happens kind of thing. And it's like, wow, there's a whole race to run in the middle. And so, do you have a thought? One of the first guests that I had on this show was the founder of Willow, a big digital twin company. You probably know them well. Do you see what you're envisioning and what you can sort of hydrate for businesses to be a form of a digital twin where you know how often employees interact, whether they interact on behalf of customers or even products? Is it an out of stock signal that got them to come to the side counter, or was it a customer, or was this a normal course of it's 3 o'clock, it's time to stock up for the rush? How do you think about it? I think in terms of digital twin. Thoughts?
I mean, I've got to give you full royalties on this digital twin conversation, Vic, because you threw it in my brain in the past, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. Which is, I think about digital twin in like that planogram layout, pathways for the store, so on and so forth. And I love the challenge and this idea that you have around building on digital twin, which is, what's the interaction? What's the fall off? What's the barrier to purchase? What was the secondary and tertiary opportunity within the category based on the fact that we have changed the ways people can self-service? So, that's actually what gets me really excited, especially when we think about the radio traffic. How do you create like
Yeah,
a radio traffic twin? How do you create like, here's all the pages, here's all the phone calls, here's all the text messages, here's all the radios, and now we create a voice twin of the store, and then we layer that on top of Plano. Like that conversation that you got sparked in my mind, I think is a really terrific opportunity for people to really start thinking more about how do we layer novel, because radio traffic is a novel use of data. How do we start thinking about these other inputs and layering them on what I would consider the traditional digital twin?
BOP's collaborative inventory intelligence technology is helping many retailers and CPGs such as Colgate Palmolive, PepsiCo, Coty, and Duracell avoid lost sales, markdowns, and spoilage by streamlining their next-gen collaborative planning, forecasting, and replenishment process. Learn more at bops.ai.
so you're saying radio traffic might look like hits to a website, realistically, right? If you're talking about calls for stocking and internal calls, so tasks for stocking, right? What's the time to live for that task to stocking? Um, really anything to do with the customer. And so for our retail nerds out there that are looking for data to really juice their store experience, I think first you have to know, right? The data will tell you what's going on. So you said a digital twin for radio traffic, and radio traffic, if you can even visualize it, right, is everywhere. Like it's all directions at once, right? You've got, and it's not always over the air, like you said. It's peer to peer, right?
Yep.
I'm in the automotive area, calling for us. A customer service person to come help a customer get a large product down and out to their vehicle because it's been purchased, right? It's just little things like that. And then I suppose you would also pick up the digital traffic, right? Because some stores, you got the management using digital traffic. And then I also suppose that you would translate that digital traffic. Manager walks by a side counter, makes a note, the old store walk note that says, we need to add this item to the 4 o'clock walk, right? They can take a picture and text it to the department manager or the responsible person, or they can capture the data about that, the barcode, key in the instruction, and the system can make that a task, right? Taking that hop of, tell the third shift that they need to do this task. Amazing, amazing. How soon? How soon do you think we will be here? And I don't know if I'm asking you to make a forward-looking forecast on your business or what, but just the market itself. When will we be to this sort of digital era?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's two answers. One is we're there today in terms of connecting all those networks, right? We're there on connecting a two-way radio to push to talk. We're there on, you know, Teams and text connected to radio. I mean, we've got the ability to say something over the radio that will auto populate a text message, and the same way to text a store and say there's a channel, there's a message available for receiving on channel two, and when you receive on channel two, you'll get that text message through cognitive services over as a voice command. So that's all there and that's happening. And frankly, one of the inspirations for that is, and I was just out east in that particular store, really high volume store, and a general manager, amazing female leader in the business, and she always wears a little radio hanging off of her ear. I'm like, why do you always wear that radio hanging off your ear? She's like, I'm not here to talk to anybody necessarily, Nolan, but I just kind of want the heartbeat. I want to know the heartbeat, what's going on in the business. I want to hear that all of a sudden we needed to bring up three people up to cash. I want to hear that someone's asked for something over and over again. So it's just little white noise, but I've been running boxes for a long time. And that's kind of what it is. I'm like, that's so fascinating because I look at that as the second part of the answer, which is that's where I see the great opportunity within AI. That opportunity in AI is to say, now that we have all these inputs across all these broken segregated components, and there's nothing more broken than a two-way radio, it's inherently a closed loop network. But if we can bring all that data in to know that we bring up four people on cache every hour within this block of time, or this is when this goes sideways, or this is where that goes sideways, and the deli falls apart at this hour on the radio because of this is happening. That famous or a inspirational thought leader that's got the radio hanging off of your ear, that's really actually where I think things all go because you can't replicate that person.
Yeah.
They're one in, 1,000, and we all get jealous that we don't have that person running the store. That's with data, that's what we can actually add to the business. So that's how I close that loop of like, that's where it's headed is we get to replicate not all that person because we can't replace people, but we can augment and we can support and help if we bring that data in and help with some of the decision making.
So you haven't used one hockey reference. We've been talking for, I don't know, 35, 40 minutes. And so I'll ease it in for you. So you're effectively skating to where the puck's going, right? So this thought leader in the business who who can cognitively manage the white noise, right? And I'm going to tell you, right, having been in the retail business for a while, there's a there's a point in time, right, that where you have just enough cognitive load to apply to the white noise,
Yep.
right? Become a district manager, and yeah, no, I can't do that. What am I going to list to four, five, eight stores,
Yep.
right? And so bringing that signal, right? Is it taking, letting, and it's kind of creepy if you think about it this way, right? That you would be listening to all traffic, and there may be patterns that we're not looking for. So part of, I think, what the challenge of innovators in the business is not doing a legacy approach and saying, I'm going to listen for the three or four things that I know. No, let the AI listen and then ask it what it heard and what were the
Absolutely.
insights. Because there's going to be the two that you thought were there and six others that, oh, did you know that? The bathroom has to be cleaned every day between 4 and 6, but we have somebody on staff at 7. And so every day we're pulling somebody off the floor to come, handle some issue. And so really, really cool. Do you have are you scared at all? And it's probably the wrong question to ask you, a founder. Does the data scare you in terms of the data science necessity, or is AI the secret weapon for you in terms of, you mentioned Moneyball. Do you have an angle on it? And you don't have to divulge any IP secrets.
Yeah, I mean, we're drowning in data in this industry, right? there's too much data. So there's an entire conversation and a conversation on Reeds. I'll talk about that. But really, what it kind of comes into is that we don't have a whole lot of operational data. So what we're looking for is how do we get the best operational data, which is novel that we've never really analyzed before. How do we bring it all into one centralized point? And then it's really working with, and maybe that is the question to you around like your bullishness on the costs on some of this type of stuff and where
Mhm.
that lies. But I mean, that's really that stuff doesn't scare is definitely not the right word. Consideration for sure is something that we're looking at. How do we throttle some of the data? How do we parse the data? How do we maintain costs? Because when you do this in one store or five stores, it's a cool science experiment. When you then throw it into 5,000, things really change. So that's it's a consideration, and maybe you can help me out with kind of your thoughts on adoption based on the ability to scale this stuff.
I in talking NRF this year was one of the best NRFs for deep thought around the hard problems that the business serves. We've solved a lot of the easy problems, like robotics, and we've solved a lot of the easy problems. And so I'm starting to hear my executive customers talk about, actually, I do want to reduce my reliance on, human resources, right? Not I don't it's not I don't want to fire a bunch of people, but I want to grow my business without having to correspondingly grow the headcount because that holds me back. Right? So now I have to wait for the opportunity to get bigger than the cost of the additional human capital. And so and then that calculation, then at the same time, you have your competitors moving forward. You got your business agreement out, your CFO's not happy, that kind of thing. And so I try to get it into a space where you can't not afford to do this, right? We can take 35% productivity improvement with the people you have, and then you can deploy them further. You can't not afford to do this because there is your growth. The next big idea that comes, I just gave you a 35% buffer that you can go invest in. So that's what we're trying to get to, and business leaders are really adopting that, right? And saying the quiet part out loud is, yes, if this can help me forego adding heads, very expensive heads, to my business, it's a win-win, right? Because me not growing doesn't help the people that are here, right? And it sure doesn't get me any closer to hiring people. And so that's my thought. I don't know if you have any parting thoughts. If not, I'll close this out and let you tell the audience where they can find you. We don't use this as a marketing tool for your business or my business. It's just two thought leaders having a discussion. But I suspect that there's going to be a lot of folks in the audience who say, "I want to talk to that guy." So I want to offer you the opportunity to sort of share where we could find you.
Well, I hope so. But yeah, I mean, to round that off, Vic, there's some people out there that make some pokes at Sync sometimes about trying to get rid of the associate or lower the time, and all this is we already do self checkout, so we're putting more onus on people. If people can't get help in a retail store, they're going to take their mobile phone. They're very comfortable with it, and they're going to buy that thing on Amazon. So all we need to do is make that experience much better than the Amazon experience because they're already in the store. They've spent
Yeah.
the time and the money and the gas. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to take low value tasks and shift that frontline worker, that associate, that team member to go into more of a high value task. That's what
Yeah.
we're doing. You can't hire enough people in these stores. It
Yeah.
is just a constant need to keep that churning. So that's that piece on that whole side. So that's kind of where we are and where we're going with the whole thing. And if people do like this conversation, I very humbly thank you for having me on the show. And I've got you hooked on things, so hopefully we'll hook more people on it. But yeah, I mean, certainly take a look at what we're doing on the website synctech.com. You mentioned Modern Work Mondays for Retail with Jeff Strasser, who's a peer of yours over at Microsoft, who's one of my favorite people. So try to tune in for those. We do our best to do them on every Monday. We have a channel on YouTube called Retail Clinic. So we'll take you through stores and we'll kind of show some of this thing in real time and walk you through some of these demos and do some of our trainings there. You mentioned the brain trust with Retail Wire. Hit me up on LinkedIn, Nolan Wheeler, and then of course, take a look at Sync on LinkedIn as well, because our team does a great job of putting out different training videos. It's not always, thankfully, my talking head. It's some of our other folks that are frankly a lot smarter than I am. But yeah, take a look at those resources if you want to learn more.
Great. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Nolan. And whenever we talk, there's stuff left unsaid. So perhaps we'll have you back after we start. If you move the ball forward or push the puck to the other side of the rink, right? We can bring you back and give the audience an update. So I'm impressed with the every Monday episode. I try to do these monthly. As I've taken a couple of months off, so for the audience, we do have a lineup of thought leaders that we want to bring your way and expose you to. And for now, again, I thank you for joining me, and I thank the audience for joining us both on the Beyond the Tech.
Thanks, man. It's been an honor for you to invite me.